success stories told by the people who lived them.
We're going to have some guests on this show that everybody knows, and we're going to have guests on this show that nobody knows yet.
One by one, Nick Hyder is adding hits to the hit streak.
Blessings, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Hit Streak. I'm your man, Nick Hyder, and I got an extra special treat for you in the Hit Lab with me today. He's literally a legend in his craft, right? Check it out. He is a two-time Hall of Fame member, the 2022 Tennessee Sports Writer of the Year, a sports writer, a longtime sports writer and columnist for the Tennessean. Mike Organ is in the building. How we doing, Mike?
I am doing great, Nick. I feel like I'm in a spaceship. Your equipment, everything you've got here is so nice and so advanced that it's an honor to be here. And I'm so happy to be on your podcast, which I'm a big fan of, and always been a fan of the Hyder family.
Thank you very much. That gets the first hit right there, no doubt, baby.
I like it.
Absolutely,
one for one.
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate everything that you said. This is an incredible room. We cut no corners. There's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and we believe in doing things the right way. One of the best decisions we've ever made, for sure.
I'm still looking for something I don't like about this place, including not only the inside, but the outside. You're surrounded by some great restaurants, which I regret not coming a little earlier to get lunch at. But I love everything about this. It is such an upbeat staff, and everything about it's just enjoyable to be here.
Thank you, man. The team's phenomenal. Great job, team. Fist bump city, baby. There
Everywhere.
We go. All right. So, all right. Before we even get into like the two-time Hall of Fame Sports Writer of the Year, all those things, one of the things I've been dying to ask you. Okay. And by the way, guys, Mike Organ is a fellow board member of the Nashville Old Timers Baseball Association with me. We would not be doing in that organization what we're doing if it was not for all the things that you do to get us out there through those outlets to help us promote all the good things that the organization is doing for the game of baseball, the facilities, and those young children, those young athletes that need it, right?
Well, and I got to give you a plug because you helped me get up to date on social media and things like that when you were the president, and you asked me to come in and help you with communications of the board a few years ago. And I thought, I got to really step it up because Nick's ahead of what we're doing. So, you getting us out on Twitter and some other platforms was a big help for me, and I enjoyed working. That was the first time we really worked closely together.
Absolutely.
And that was a fun experience.
Man, it's just, I'm just blown away for literally almost a century how no matter what generation is running that organization, like people just keep showing up.
It's incredible. I mean, we had a packed house 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
For our banquet, and we had almost a packed house back when we came back from COVID. I mean, right. Of course, at that time, everybody was so glad. I used to tell people, everybody was so glad to get to anything. They would come out for anything. That's because they've been stuck in the house for so long. But I am impressed by everything the board does, everything the association does. Yeah. And we keep doing well with speakers too.
And it's unbelievable the roster of board members and all the things that they do, from councilmen to judges to financiers managing billions of dollars. I mean, it's what a group to be a part of.
Yeah.
Such a blessing. All right, so the question I've been dying to ask you. All right, so everybody always asks me, what's the most powerful tool in your tool belt today, Nick? And it's 100%, no doubt, my podcast, right? What we're doing right here, because I get to hang out with amazing people. We get to share networks. I learn. I learn every episode a lot of things from somebody. But you've been doing this for how many years have you been?
I think this is my 38th year.
Wow.
After you get past 20, it's hard to keep up with, but I think I finished my 37th year last year, so I think I'm in my 38th year.
Man, that's
started right out of college, so people don't think I'm too old. I started 2 days after I got out of MTSU. Actually, I started part-time in my final semester at MTSU in '85, and then got hired full-time 2 days after I graduated on Saturday and started on Monday.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. And kids, If you think that's the experience, what it's like when you get out of college, it ain't that way for everybody. You got to be really. That just goes to show you how good it is craft is, right?
Now you got to pay your dues, and I paid my dues there. I was stuck on the desk for a couple of years. Those first couple of years, running copy and answering phones and things like that.
Well, in 38 years, you have shared time, shared the stage. You've interviewed some unbelievable people.
Yeah, when I started, I was the first person who had gotten hired at the Tennessean in about 10 or 12 years. And so everybody was pretty set in their beats. I didn't have a beat at the time. I started covering high schools, and they just kind of used me as a utility man, which is what I developed into and what I'm still doing today to a great degree. But a lot of celebrities would come into town, high-profile athletes and coaches and whatnot, and they would send me out to talk to them because everybody else was busy with their beats. David Clymer was covering Tennessee. Larry Woody was covering Vanderbilt. Larry Taff was covering high schools. So I was the only one free to do stuff like that. So, yeah, I got right out of the chute. I got to interview a lot of impressive athletes, and it made an already fun job even that much more fun.
Absolutely. Who are some people that stand out? I got to know. That stand out to you, and it's no disrespect to anybody else because it's too many to name. We'd be here all weekend to do that. But who are some people that stand out to you that you just were personal favorites?
Well, I had to do something a couple of years ago where I had to list some of them. Mm-hmm. So I've got them on my phone, and I guess some people I'll go through this list a little bit: Shaquille O'Neal, Magic Johnson, Wayne Gretzky, Nick Saban, George Rogers, Bill Elliott. Archie Manning, Billy Sims, Raleigh Fingers. That was through the Baseball Association. Mm-hmm. Let's see, Pete Maravich, Reggie White, Tony Dorsett, Walter Payton, Bart Starr, Mary Lou Retton, Jerry Tarkanian, John Majors many times, Gene Stallings, Rick Pitino, Bruce Jenner. His name was Bruce then.
That's right.
Ray Perkins, Ray Mears, Sidney Moncrief, Spud Webb. Had an interesting evening with Spud Webb and Dominique Wilkins.
Wow.
Let's see. Sam Bertigliano, Marcus Dupree.
Okay.
Herschel Walker.
Wow.
E.J. Jr., Mike Krzyzewski, Urban Meyer, Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson. I saw Bo Jackson running a track meet, actually. Pete Rose.
Wow.
Got Bruce Jenner listed twice. Arnold Palmer, Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus, Lee Trevino, Nancy Lopez, Dale Earnhardt Jr., never Dale Earnhardt Sr., unfortunately. Richard Petty, Danica Patrick, John Daly, Bill Walton, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Wow.
Charles Barkley. I was with Charles Barkley one night when he declared he was going to run for mayor.
Okay.
Governor of Alabama, but never did. Bill Belichick.
Wow.
Keith Moreland, Richard Dent, Ray Lewis, Joe Paterno. And that's just a sampling, but that's a lot of them right there.
Who are some guys, who are people, I should say, who are some people that, when you get in an interview, it's happened to me a few times where, you – in an hour, you're getting some pretty detailed personal information that not a lot of times people have heard before, and it's people are always blowing me away that you think because they're in the spotlight, and then you really get to know them, and it's wow, who's some people that just stood out to you man, I totally didn't have them pegged right, or they just blew your mind? Well,
probably the most is probably was one of my favorite interviews, and that was Pete Maravich. And I caught Pete at the near the end of his life. Matter of fact, he died a year to the date after I interviewed him.
Wow.
And I thought I knew everything there was about Pete Maravich because I grew up in that era. I was very young, but being a sports fan at a very early age, I remember Pete Maravich and remember him well, but I had no idea the things that he went through, the things that his father Press put him through, the things that he did to become the athlete that he did, and then the things that he went through in his spiritual life, where he went from some really bizarre beliefs to one level to another, to ending up as a Christian. That's where I talked to him, was at a church out on Charlotte Pike.
Wow.
And he gave me every bit of an hour. And we sat down in a pew and talked for about an hour. And
oh, man.
Could not believe. Several times I had to pinch myself thinking, at times you'd forget who you're talking to. You just think you're just talking to somebody else. And I'm remembering this might be the greatest basketball player of all time. He's one of them for sure.
Right.
And that was a very surreal interview there.
There's a Disney made a movie back in when I was a kid called The Pistol, and it's believe it or not, when my son was a little younger, we actually found a DVD somewhere and bought it, and my son has watched that movie a lot of times. That was one of my favorites as a kid to watch. But Pete was a guy who a lot of kids today wouldn't even know who that name is.
Yeah, it's unfortunately.
And a lot of the game of basketball today would not be the same had he not played it, because he introduced so many things to the game itself.
He did, and the game has changed in a manner in which you so wish you could see him play today, because he played when there was no 3-point line, and to imagine the points he would have scored.
That's right.
With the 3-point line. But yeah, the between the legs dribbling, the behind the back dribbling, which he did not for show, but that was part of his game. And the no look passes, he was phenomenal. And it's a disappointment. It's really sad to think that some people today only know him because his name's on a building at LSU.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, he was just very, very exciting, and he's just innovation is the word that comes to mind when I think of him. He was an innovator.
Yeah, and he would come to Vanderbilt to play, and Roy Skinner always had Vanderbilt had success against LSU during that stretch. Roy Skinner would say, we're going to let Pete Maravich get however many points he wants to get, which would be a lot, maybe 50 or 60, but we're going to shut everybody else down. And that worked, and it was surprising that more teams didn't do that.
Who else? Anybody else stand out to you that kind of blew your mind?
Shaquille O'Neal, just being in the same room with him. If there's enough room in there for you to be in there with him,
right? It
was just phenomenal. It was just incredible to be there with him. I've met a lot of big people, tall people, large people. 7-footers. Steve Turner played at Vanderbilt, was 7'4", and. You think you've seen it all until you see Shaquille O'Neal. Not only tall, but just gargantuan, and his hands are so big. Yeah. And Rudy Kalis, a good friend, who is about the same height as I am. We had a picture made with each of us on the side of it, and we literally look like kindergarten kids. We come up to about the higher part of his stomach. Wow. That's about it. We look like children.
Yeah.
And he was very affable, very laid back. This was before he just blew up.
He's a hell of a businessman today.
Goodness. He's on everything. Every time you turn on the television, he's on there. You can now get your Siri voice to be in Shaquille O'Neal voice.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
You can get him to give you a wake-up call. He can be your wake-up alarm. He's amazing. And you're right, the things he owns now, everything, Marilyn Monroe, the things he owns are incredible. But yeah, that he was a very interesting guy. Joe Paterno was an interesting guy. Okay. Bruce Jenner was an interesting guy. The way that came about, I had no idea. I was up in my office one day, and I get a phone call from somebody down in the lobby, and they say, "Hey, Bruce Jenner's here if you want to talk to him." I was very busy. And I was like, I don't want to talk to him. I've got something I got to do. But then I thought, well, he is an Olympian, so he is in town. And back in those days, before social media and so many venues of communication, that's what people would do. PR people would just take an athlete or a high-profile person that was in town and just take them to the TV stations, show up to the newspaper. And I was the only one at the newspaper that day. So I said, yeah, tell him to meet me down in our cafeteria. So I went down and spent 20 minutes talking to him. And wow. He had been in town to speak to a youth group over in East Nashville. And then for him to evolve into what he became, was just, another surreal moment there. Mm-hmm. And like I said, Joe Paterno was a fun interview. Not all were great interviews. Tony Dorsett was not I guess affable. I tell you who was great was Marcus Dupree.
Okay.
For people who don't remember Marcus Dupree, he was the next Herschel Walker.
Okay.
He was a great running back at Oklahoma, and he was just phenomenal. Well, he was at 1510 doing an interview, and Bill King was the host, and he called me during a commercial, said, "Hey, if you want to come over and catch Marcus Dupree, he'll be in our lobby. He'll be leaving in about 15 or 20 minutes." So I drove over there real quick because he was the hottest thing going at the time. He had sued Lloyd's of London $10 million because they weren't going to pay on his insurance after he got injured playing in the USFL. So he comes down in the lobby and he says, I said, "Can I interview you for, just for a second?" He goes, "Well," he said, "we're going over to a stereo place over on Elliston Place. We called and they're going to stay open. They were closing at 5. He said, "I got my money today." He said, "I got my $10 million today." And he said, "I want to buy a stereo." And he goes, "This is Music City. I was told about this stereo place over at Elliston Place." But he said, they're closing. They close at 5, and it's 5 minutes after 5 now. They're waiting on us to come over there. He said, "Do you want to ride with us?" So I rode with him and his agent in an SUV from Music Row, which is where 1510 was, over to Elliston Place. Walked in with him to pick out his stereo.
Wow.
And he had him play a bunch of different ones. And just when he had a down moment, I could ask him 2 or 3 questions. Then they took me back to my car over at 1510, and we went our separate ways.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and we could sit here and talk about you could tell stories like that all day long, and we might should do that one day, because that's very entertaining and unique and cool. But man, you've been 38 years. You've been doing this, and it's been all at the same spot.
Yeah, never worked anywhere. Never had a full-time job other than the Tennessean. And actually started part-time at the Tennessean when I was in the 8th grade. 14, that's 8th grade, right?
Yep.
Yeah, coming in on Saturdays and Sundays, doing nothing but for 8 hours on Saturday and 6 hours on Sunday, doing nothing but answering the call from all the gamblers that would call, because that's the only way they could find out the outcome of a game back then, was calling the newspaper.
Wow. We
had the wire services, so 90% of the phone calls I took were gamblers, and I was there to answer the phone so the other writers, the full-time writers, could do their jobs, and the editors and the everybody else could do their jobs while I kept the phones manned. And yeah, I'd work 14 hours a week when I was in 8th, 9th grade.
Man.
And then 10th grade, of course, high school football started, and then I went to college, and then returned to Tennessee in my senior year.
Man, that is cool. I mean, an athlete staying with one franchise for their whole career is unbelievable. And in this day and time, especially in your field, I would think that's very rare. Never happens anymore. But when I started, it was not uncommon. It was pretty common for an athlete, a pro athlete, to stay with one franchise for their entire career. So I think that kind of got embedded in me. And I had some opportunities to go elsewhere. I could have gone to Cocoa Beach and worked at USA Today's Upstart Florida Today, had an offer there, and some other places, but just never had any desire to leave. This was home, and I got to travel through my job. I mean, right. I covered Vanderbilt for 10 years, from 91 to 2002, went to every football game, basketball game, home and away. Mm-hmm. So I got to travel plenty and see the world, or see the country, as much as I wanted to. So I never had any desire to leave permanently, because I got to see so many places through my job. Well, you got guys, there's a whole page full of decorations on his accomplishments and his body of work. But I mean, a 2-time Hall of Fame inductee. That's
and the first one was unusual, because it was the Nashville Football Coaches Association, and that kind of caught me off guard. It's kind of the local high school and college football coaches in Nashville, mm-hmm. and they inducted me as a contributor, I think in 2016, and that one caught me off guard. Of course, the other one, being in the Tennessee Sports Writers Hall of Fame, is something you shoot for from the day one.
Absolutely.
And I joined people like Fred Russell, John Bibb, who hired me, Tommy Squires, who was part of my hiring process, Jimmy Davey, my mentor, David Clymer, Larry Woody, all these guys that that I idolized, and then some who I got to work with, I got to join them in that hall.
Man, that's incredible. And then last year's Tennessee Sports Writer of the Year. Congratulations, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was from the National Association, and I think that had a lot to do. As I mentioned earlier, I've kind of been a utility player since the first day. And this past year, I covered the Predators for a long stretch, and then did a little bit of everything, as I always do, through the summer, covering NASCAR. We now have one NASCAR race with the second one on the way, coming to the Fairground Speedway, and then covering open wheel racing, IndyCar racing, and then the week before the NFL season started, our NFL beat writer got another job and left, so I went to cover the Titans through the latter part of the season. So I think that that exposure helped me get that national award.
Absolutely, man. And I've got here that you're the longest serving sports writer in town. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think there's any other sports. I don't know that there's any other media member in town right now since Rudy Kalis, as we talked about before, retired. Hope Hines retired. Bill King's been at it a long time. We're close to being the same. He still has a show on WNSR. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody else that's close anymore.
What are how many different beats have you covered since you've been to Tennessee?
Every beat that's at the Tennessean. I have been the backup writer and the full-time writer of the Predators on several occasions. The Titans, full-time a couple of years ago for a stretch, and then again for half of this season pretty much. And then I've been the backup Titans beat writer for a long time. Covered Vanderbilt, as I mentioned, from 91 to 2002. Never covered Tennessee. Okay. Had the opportunity to cover Tennessee at one point. I want to say it was in the early to mid 90s, but at that time we would move our beat writer to Knoxville. And I just, again, like I said earlier, I just didn't want to leave Nashville. And so I turned that down. And I wasn't offered that. I was just offered a chance to interview for it. And I just said, that's not something I'm interested in. But I've covered everything else. I'm currently the NASCAR writer, the outdoors writer. Inherited both of those beats from Larry Woody when he left, even though I've never hunted in my life and hadn't fished in probably 25 years. But, our police beat writer was never a criminal or a policeman. Yeah. So, it can be done. That's without right. being whatever, our entertainment writer was never a movie star. So you can do it. And, it's actually... That's kind of helped my longevity is doing things like that because they're so different from sticks and balls, race cars and outdoors hunting and fishing, that kind of gave me a break from the other sports. And one of the reasons I haven't gotten burned out in this 4-decade stretch.
That's interesting.
Then I covered high schools for a couple of years, covered MTSU, the OVC, for a few years, and that pretty much takes care of every beat. The Sounds, I filled in for the Sounds a lot. Never was the full-time Sounds beat writer.
Gotcha.
The Sounds used to be our biggest budget at the Tennessean back before we had any other pro sports, and so we covered them hard. We went to every home and away game, and that's a little bit too much for one person to do, so I would fill in sometimes for that person.
That's right. Yeah. What do they play, like 90? Is it 96 game?
So I think that's about what they were playing back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were long ways because of the the conferences and divisions they were in. So yeah, we used to put a lot into the Nashville Sounds.
A lot of travel. About 28 days a month.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
And playoffs.
And then you would show up, the playoffs also. Then you would show up for a BP. And people think, well, all you do is go to a baseball game every night, right? No, you would show up for BP. You go out and talk to some people then, talk to the manager during the middle of the day. And then you just wait for the game to start, and then you'd cover the game after that.
That's right.
It was that was a tough beat. And I was kind of glad I never did have that one full time.
Well, in almost 40 years, the landscape of sports in Nashville, really in at least the United States, has changed drastically, right? Walk me through that.
Absolutely, and that's a good pivot from what we're talking about, the Nashville Sounds. Like I said, they used to be our top budget item, but we spent more time traveling with them. And today, we don't cover the Nashville Sounds.
Wow.
Throughout the years, we realized people don't keep up with minor league baseball the way they keep up with Major League Baseball. They don't care about wins and losses, batting, who has the best batting average, whatever, statistics and so on. And the Nashville Sounds realize that. That's why if you go out to First Tennessee Park now, then you'll realize that baseball is just a side component.
That's right.
They've got ping pong tables. They've got a bar in the outfield. They've got shuffleboard. They've got miniature golf.
Yep.
They've got all kinds of things to do other than watch baseball.
Yep.
Because it's a center of entertainment, and baseball is just a component of it.
That's right.
So we don't get a lot of kickback from the Sounds or any kind of minor league association for not covering them anymore, because they also agree what they are, and they have modeled themselves into what they need to be in order to exist and thrive, because they still, the Sounds had the best home attendance last year, and I believe the last 2 years have had the best home attendance, about 8,000 a night for home games, and that's 2 or 3 games, 4 games a week sometimes.
Yeah, weekdays and all combined. It's hard to get unless you're in when I played minor league ball, I played in some larger markets and some smaller markets. The smaller markets, there's just a lot to compete with here in a big market.
Right.
The smaller markets, that is the like we have an NFL team and an NHL team and I mean we're the Country Music Hall of Fame and everything else. In the smaller markets, that team might be the biggest show in town.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to get attached. You can't get attached to players.
No.
In the minor league system.
When they're coming and going.
Coming and going on.
The whole idea is to get them out of there.
That's right.
That's the thing. They don't want to be here. You don't want to be here. You want to move them up.
That's right.
Or move them out.
That's right.
But like you said, at one point, that tells you how much the sports landscape in Nashville has changed, because at one point, the Sounds were just like you're talking about it in some of the minor league places you played. They were the only game in town. From March until August, that was it.
That's right.
What else did you do? College baseball was non-existent as far as being a spectator sport. It existed, but people didn't go out and watch college baseball back in those days. And there was no, we didn't have a NASCAR. We had a NASCAR race at the fairgrounds, but that's just, and we actually had 2 a year at one point, but that's just 2 weeks out of the year.
Right.
So you went a long stretch where baseball was it, minor league baseball. And then Vanderbilt football, which has never been as big as college football in other towns, but it was something that you had to cover and pay attention to. But minor league baseball went from being it to basically not being on the radar now.
That's right. And they were when Schmitto and Farrell and those guys brought professional baseball back to Nashville in the late 70s. I mean, there was standing room only, like 10, 11,000 people all the time.
Yep.
At those things.
And Larry was a master he knew too that people didn't track batting averages and statistics and wins and losses.
Yeah.
So he had a lot of, he would always keep his admission cheap, parking free. He just wanted to get you in. Then he'd sell you ice cream.
That's right.
In a cup and charge you for it, and beer. And so Larry was a market. He still is. He still got 17, 18 bowling alleys. He works full time still to this day. I have a breakfast with him every Monday morning.
Oh man,
at Cracker Barrel.
Tell him we
over on Armory Drive. Will do. And he still works hard. He's always the first to get up and leave the table because he says he has to get to work, making others of us feel a little bit guilty. But Larry is a marketing genius. Like I said, once he got you in, that's where he would get his money from you at the when he had the Sounds. And
he'd be a good interview, I bet. I need to get him.
You need to get him on, absolutely. And as you mentioned, he and Farrell back in those days, minor league baseball was so big that they brought a second team to Nashville for a while.
That's right. That was awesome. It was a game almost every night.
There was a game. There was a year where there was baseball played every night during the baseball season. I remember that story that we wrote. Tony Coleman, I think, was covering the Sounds for us at the time, and he wrote a story about baseball being played every night for one season. The Express was only here. That was the other team. I think they were only here 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
But
it was a AA and a AAA team.
Yep,
right?
AA and AAA. And is that not what brought Michael Jordan here?
It was the he was with the AA team and came up to play against the Express.
Came up to play against Express. Yep,
that's right. That would have been in like 94, 95.
Yeah,
give or take, something like that. And they had. I mean, I grew up. We had season tickets. My grandparents did. So I was at Greer Stadium all the time. I loved that place. I got to hang out on the field. I played there, that was a very cool venue.
And it is so disappointing to see what it's become and why the city didn't step up or someone step up, preferably the city, step up and preserve it and turn it into a park, a green space. We're so big on green spaces now.
Yeah.
Do something with it, unless to keep it from falling into disrepair and just a horrible place that it is today. Now I know it'll soon be condominiums or convenience store or whatever, but it could have been preserved and made something nice. It's right there on the hill, Knob Hill, and it just could have been so nice if they would have just stepped up and turned it into something memorable.
That's right. It was it is. There's a lot of things like that, venues and teams and people and they come and go but they always hold a place in your heart. But then you make room for the new ones that are coming to town and everything else. What's out of all the venues that you've covered? We talked about some of the biggest people that you've covered. What's some of the coolest places? Like, because you get backdoor access, dude. You get to go in, you get behind the scenes. You get a different view of everything else. What's something like that sticks out? Like, man, like I'm one of the few people that gets to see that. Nobody else does.
That's a good question. Texas Christian, TCU, went to cover Vanderbilt there. And Joe Biddle and I went, legendary sports writer here, worked for the Nashville Banner and the Tennessean. Joe Biddle and I went down to cover TCU. We didn't realize that when we got there, TCU had the highest football stadium in the country. Now, that was the home side. Now, the away side was about the size of Antioch on Blue Hole Road.
Yeah.
That side, that long stretch.
Yeah.
It's only about 11 feet high, but it was that was what the visitor side looked like. Everything was on the home side. Well, being the beat writer, I had to get my story done the second the game got over, so I couldn't go down for interviews. This was during the Vanderbilt Woody Woodenhofer era.
Okay. And
Joe Biddle had to go down and do the interviews. Well, if you don't get out of the press box within about 7 to 10 minutes left in the game, they shut the elevator down in order to take all the people above you, which includes the assistant coaches that are in the box, and then the presidents and the other brass that are up there. They get use of the elevator until they all get down. So Joe goes over to the elevator, and it's shut down by the time he gets there. He has to climb down the stairs to the tallest stadium in the country. Fortunately, he was down there long enough that by the time he came back up, the elevator was open again.
Oh my goodness!
Well, that's
pretty cool.
The Notre Dame press box, very interesting. Went up there for Vanderbilt at Notre Dame football press box. They have all press boxes have food because sports writers have to have food. They go for free, everything free, and they have that in the Notre Dame press box, but it's not free. The only thing free in the Notre Dame press box is Coke and popcorn.
Gotcha.
The candy, the burgers, the hot dogs, you pay for in the press box.
Interesting.
Because Notre Dame doesn't have to have you. They'll get their media. They're not gonna try to lure you in with candy and whatever. Same way at Rupp Arena. You get popcorn and Coke, and that's it.
Wow.
They don't serve a meal like they do out here at Vanderbilt, at UT, anywhere else. You get popcorn and Coke, and that's it. If you want anything else, you go to the concession stand.
That's confidence, isn't it?
Yeah, that's confidence. Now, I don't know how long that's going to last at Kentucky.
Yeah.
With where they are today, they might have to start putting some bills out.
That's right. Well, how has not that long ago, all the sports was in print, and now you got to look like if you see print, it's rare. Like it's kind of cool to get something like that. How has time changed the way that you do your job, and like what are your thoughts and opinions on it?
Well, and that's a good spinoff from talking about that game at Texas TCU. Is that back then, you tried to you had to have your story done by. If it ended at 10, the game ended at 9:30 or quarter to 10, you needed to be done by 11 so it could be put in print. You don't have those guidelines anymore, but you have even stricter guidelines, deadlines, because now everybody, as soon as that game is over, gets an alert on their phone who won, the stars of the game. They don't wait until the next morning to read in the newspaper who won.
Yeah.
By the next day in the newspaper, you can't tell them anything they don't already know.
Right.
So by that night on the TV sports, you can't tell them anything that they don't already know. So it's not even the same job, pretty much, Nick. It's two jobs from what I had when I started to what we do today. We have to have what's called an instant story done the second the game ends. And I'm talking about the second, within 3 to 5 seconds after the game ends, you hit publish and you're online and your story's available to anybody that wants to read it. You started writing it during the game, you capped it off in the final seconds, and then it's out there the second the game is over, because you want people to know they can come to you with the results and some details of the game. Now, that's all they're going to get at that point, but they also know that if they stick with you, that you're going to add to that story some more details in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Then you're going to add quotes from the coach. Then you're going to add quotes from the players, the opposing coach, the opposing player, and the story develops right there in front of them. Whereas back in the days of print, you did all that stuff. You wrote your story, then you waited and you added quotes, but you didn't do anything with it until you hit your deadline. And when you hit your deadline, you did what you sent is all that got in there. If you only had quotes from one player by 11 o'clock and that's your deadline, then that's what was in the paper the next day.
Gotcha.
That's not the way it is now. You can add up until all night long.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's injured and goes into the training room after the game and doesn't get to the interview room until an hour after the game, you can wait and then get to them then and then add to the story.
Gotcha. So it really like a story's never done anymore, I guess, at the end of the day. No,
it's constantly developing. And, of course, that's what you want. You want the reader to continue to come to you and spend time on your site. You know about that.
That's right.
And to check back. And that's why you put at the bottom of the story, check back for updates. And then, like, I'll tweet out a story or put it on Instagram, and then I'll put in a hashtag at the top, updated. Right. So that people will know, they'll go back and look at it, and they'll see that headline, which might still be the same, but they'll know that it's a different story. Something's been added to it, so they need to hit it again.
Right. It's, it's like, folks, by the way, we've got the 2-time Hall of Fame inductee and Tennessee Sports Writer of the Year from the Tennessean, Mike Organ, in the building with me today. Folks, check him out. You can actually, if you want to pop him off an email, ask any questions or whatever, it's morgan@tennessean.com. You can check him out on Twitter at Mike Organ Writer, and as well as his Instagram, which I just tagged him in there. All these details will be in our show notes. But we got Mike Organ in the building, and we're talking about all kinds of good stuff, right?
All kinds of changes, because I've been at it for so long, so old.
Let me ask you this, man. So the there's everybody at the end of the day now has a network. At the end of the day, if they got a phone and a connection to the internet, they got their own network, right? Yep. But so back in the day when you would walk up before all this, when you walked up and said, "I'm with the Tennessean," people would probably be like, "Move, I got to talk to that guy," right? How it's such more of a crowded space now.
It absolutely is. I remember I was covering Vanderbilt when the internet came on around 2000, something like that. And I remember the sports information director at Vanderbilt, Rod Williamson at the time, handing me the game notes one day, and they're 2 inches thick. And he said, they tell me that as this internet continues on, we won't be having these. We won't be using paper anymore. And I'm like, Rod, this is going to come and go. Don't think you're ever going to not be doing game notes. He was right. I was wrong. And about that same time, we started having people show up at games who claimed to be with Vanderbilt Rivals.com, Commodores.com. We had bloggers, which I didn't know what a blogger was, show up and applying for credentials. Yeah. So I know for a fact that around 2003, 2004 at the CISIDA, which is College Sports Writers Sports Information Directors Association nationally, they had to get together at their convention and say, who are we going to credential and who are we not going to credential? Because basically everybody's a sports writer now. They can be if they have access to the internet.
Yeah.
And I thought that it would become a lot more rigid, and they would say, okay, you got to have, this number of, and it started out where it was like that.
Okay.
You had to have a certain circulation back when print was still big. But as that went on, they didn't care about it as much. They just wanted to be on every platform and everywhere they could. So they started credentialing most anybody that wanted to be in.
Yeah.
Now, there are tiers, like they'll let some on the front row of the press row, and then if you're not as prominent, they'll put you on the second, third, or fourth row. But that's people thought that sports writing would go away. It didn't. It just exploded, and you get what you're paying for. What a lot of them aren't trained. A lot of them are just big fans.
Yeah.
But you got to know that going in, but a lot of people get credentialed these days that I would have never thought they would.
Is it safe to say that because you have been around so long and you are a trusted source, and the Tennessean is still quite the brand? It's a staple here and a big deal. It's the Tennessee paper, right? Or the Tennessee publication, I should say now, instead of just a paper.
Yeah.
That's probably helped you keep that front row and everything else just because you've been doing it for so long and have such a great track record.
Yeah. I have editors every year. We have new writers that'll come on and they'll say, hey, do I need to send in your credential request for Tennessee football or Vanderbilt basketball or Belmont basketball? And the new writers will say, yes, please do. And I'll just sit back, I'll take care of it. And a lot of times I don't even do anything. I mean, I'll show up at a game and the credential will be waiting on me. So that's just part of it, being around for so long that, but again, like you said, the Tennessean brand, is still big, and the blue check mark on Twitter is good to have. And, the credentials that's one of the nice fruits of my labor, I guess.
So I saw a clip of the other day. I love. I always, as a player, I was always fascinated with Brian Jordan, Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders, because they did the two sport thing, right? But Deion always just Bo was his own thing, and a huge fan of Bo. But like Deion, I always loved Deion. And now that he's coaching and stuff, you get to see a totally different side of him because they do a great job with his outlets. I just love everything that he's doing. I just love him. And I saw a clip the other day where one of his longtime buddies, that's a sports writer, was doing a post-game interview or something, and he was talking about his favorite team is the Eagles, I think, and they were playing the Broncos in Colorado when Deion was there, and he was basically asking him to go with him to the game, and Deion was like, well, why would I go to that game? And he was like, to take me. How many does that? I bet that happens to you a lot, doesn't it, man, over the years?
I can't tell you how many times that I've had people, send me an email or leave me a voice message. Going back to when we had, answering machines. Hey, Mike, any chance you got a ticket to the Tennessee Vanderbilt game? Tennessee Alabama game. Tennessee Vanderbilt, if Tennessee's coming here. And I'd always be like, I've got a whole brick of them in my glove compartment. How many do you need? What people don't realize is I've never bought a ticket to anything.
Yep.
I mean, let me think about it. I went to a Titans Atlanta Falcons preseason game one time on a date with a young lady that had had tickets through her company, and I sat in the end zone and hated every minute of it. Let's see. I paid to see a MTSU Vanderbilt football game on homecoming one time because I'm an MTSU grad, and I'm sorry, it was at MTSU. It wasn't Vanderbilt. It was I can't remember who MTSU played, but I paid for a ticket for that just because I wanted to go back for homecoming. I think I've bought 2 tickets in the last 40 years. So people don't understand. I don't deal in that world. I don't get tickets. I don't know anything about buying tickets. I don't know how much a ticket costs. I don't know, what's a good price. Like somebody will ask me, say, hey, I got 2 UT Vandy basketball tickets, $25 a piece. Is that good from a scalper? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if $5 is good or $100 is good. So but that's always been interesting. They always think that they can, that I just have access, that I can just call up Vanderbilt and say, hey, Can I get 10 free tickets for whatever? And so you don't do that. You don't. That's a big time ethical no in sports writing in my field, because when you start taking free things from Vanderbilt or Belmont or Tennessee, and one of those schools gets in trouble, and you start writing something negative about them, then they're going to come back and say, hey, what about those free tickets we gave you? Can't you cut us some slack? Let us work on this a little bit. Wait till you break this. Yeah. No, you don't do that. You don't want to do that to yourself whatsoever.
Well, what? Well, I want to take them back a little bit, right? So first of all, in like Denzel Washington said something one time to a reporter where he basically said, like, they were asking him a couple questions. He said, well, you guys have a great responsibility because being first is important, but being correct at the end of the day is very, very important, right? So you are a incredibly reliable source in your field, and you have been for almost 4 decades. You know what I mean? It used to be, it's on the internet, so it must be true. That's the old joke, right? And now it's stuff all over the place where it's almost, honestly, it's hard you have to have trusted sources, people that you trust personally. So like who I listen to is probably way different than the way anybody else listens to, just because that's they've earned my trust, right?
Yeah.
You've always done a great job with that. Like what I can tell it's important to you. Why is that?
Well, I'll tell you why it's important, because when you make a mistake and you have to write a correction, that day is the worst day that you can imagine. That next day, when you're wrong on something, whether you're wrong or you misspelled something or you did anytime you have to do a correction, it absolutely ruins that next day for you. I can't even put into words how bad that day is for you. And you feel like all eyes are on you. People are rejoicing that you made a mistake. It's a terrible day. And you don't ever want to live through that. And you have to, in order to keep your credibility, you have to do a correction. You want to do a correction, but you don't want to do a correction.
Yeah.
And so you have to double and triple check something. You can't take one source and go with it. I mean, we heard yesterday that Kevin Mawai had been hired, the former, Pro Football Hall of Famer, played center here for the Titans, had been hired as the Lipscomb new football coach to replace Trent Dilfer. We had sources, but we were also hearing that it might not be true. You don't go with it until you go with your trusted sources, because you cannot be wrong. It just destroys you. I mean, your editors go ballistic if you're wrong, but nobody can make you feel as bad as you feel yourself.
Right.
If you're a legit, news person.
Absolutely. Obviously in a decade ago, even 2 decades ago, there was way less retractions than you see today. It's got to be an editor's nightmare, man.
Oh yeah. I mean, and you have to do it because, like you said, there's so many sources out there now. There's so many places to get your news that people are only going to rely on those who are credible. I mean, they might read everything just to see what somebody else is saying, but before they go and repeat something and tell somebody, hey, I heard this, or this is what the Tennessean reported, then they're only going to do it for for credible sources that they rely on. And if you have to write a retraction, you still have to do it in order to maintain that credibility.
That's right. I mean, it's such a hard thing. You want to be first, but you want to be you want to break the story, but you want to be right. And I don't know. I'm just being accountable and trustworthy is such a big deal to me. I don't want to be around people I don't want dishonest people or people that don't care about those things in my circles, because they rub off on you, right? So I want to put a wall up against anything like that. And it's, I mean, what's back in the day, I guess you only got maybe one. If that happened once and it happened twice, it was, I mean, how's the policies changed?
Yeah, if you missed it a couple of times and you started losing your credibility, even if you wrote retractions, if you missed in a certain span, twice in 2 months or whatever. You know what I found though with the evolution of where we are today is everybody wants to be first. And a lot of people are willing to just throw it out there and see if it sticks. Yeah. Because if it doesn't, so what? But what I have seen is when you're like our organization is, and you don't want to report anything until you know for sure that it's true, then people who know you and are familiar with you will say they're having a conversation at the coffee shop or on the phone or whatever, and they say, yeah, I've heard this is going to happen, at Notre Dame, or this is going to be the new Titans offensive coordinator or general manager, but I haven't seen it reported yet by the Tennessean. So until I see that, then I'm not going to believe it. But, it's interesting that this is who's being thrown out there. So you want to become that source that people wait to hear from, even if they have to wait a little bit longer from somebody else. They know that might be incorrect. But then when you report it, they're comfortable.
That's right.
And they're comfortable telling somebody else, hey, this is the new GM. How do you know that? Well, I saw it in the Tennessean. That's where we're getting to, and I'm glad we're getting to that, because there was a time where people would just take stuff and run with it.
Yeah.
And if they were wrong, they just disappeared, They were never heard from again. But you're going to be heard from again. You're going to have to report something else down the line. And that's what I like, is that people have finally gotten to where I think that if they see it in the Tennessean, then they believe it.
Absolutely. The Onion or the Babylon Bee can put some really professional looking things out there that are fake on purpose and funny. But a lot of people would just see the headline. They wouldn't click on it, read it, or look at the source and be like, did you know that this just happened?
It's hilarious. You got them bumped off Twitter for a while there. And you can speaking of the blue check mark, you can Photoshop it now.
Yep.
I'm sure your guys right here could do that. We saw that Sunday when the kicker missed another kick for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And then a couple of seconds later, Jerry Jones had tweeted looking for a kicker, and it was with check mark. And there's still people today that believe that he actually did that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not on Twitter.
That's right.
But he has a blue check mark, according to some people. And he was looking for a kicker by the end of Sunday.
Well, so you've been doing this 38 years. I didn't get to ask you, like, what? So you were an athlete, right? All the way through high school.
I actually played semi-pro football.
There you go.
That was kind of it was an assignment, but it turned into I made the team, but I think they just wanted their in-house reporter on their team.
Smart.
It was smart, and I wanted to do it, so it was a lot of fun.
That's right.
Played with Keith Davis, was on the team, former Overton and Tennessee player. John English, quarterback from Tulane and Minnesota Vikings, was on the team. James Wade, Joe Dubin, who would be a good guest for you, by the way.
Oh man, I got Schmitto. And Dubin will be great. He's hysterical. I saw him downtown maybe like a month ago.
He's a nut. He's just a complete nut. That's where we got to be friends. We'd worked out together some at a place called Club Vita out on Murfreesboro Road, but we didn't know each other until we showed up on that team together, and we got to be good buddies. And that team, it was crazy.
Just the comments alone on when you guys would be going back and forth.
Oh yeah,
it was hysterical.
We were going to play a game in Pittsburgh one time, and we took the bus, and I guess we were 30 miles outside of Nashville, and the bus driver pulls off on an exit. He says, "Everybody off." So everybody got up and got off the bus. We thought there was something wrong with the bus. He shut the door and left. He got up on the interstate, came back over, got on the entrance ramp and left. He called our owner and said, I left your team at exit 238 or whatever. And he said, why? And he goes, he had looked in the mirror, and one of the guys had a gun, and he had opened his gym bag to show the guy sitting next to him. Here's my gun. And the guy saw that, and that was a violation of that bus company. So he left us there. And we were all there to. And this is before cell phone days.
Oh no!
This was 91, 92.
Yeah.
And we all had to go to a payphone and start calling wives and friends to come pick us up.
Man.
But that team, Dubin and Walt Wells were linemen, and Walt Wells is now the coach at Eastern Kentucky.
Okay.
And we were playing in Clarksville. It was a hot night. I mean, it was hot and humid because we played through the spring and summer. So this was like a June game. And Walt gets sick and throws up on the football
Oh, no.
while the offense is in the huddle.
Oh, gosh.
And as soon as he throws up, they come out of the huddle, and Joe's trying to yell to the center. He just threw up on it, and he can't get his attention.
Oh,
and the center grabs the football.
Oh, no.
But yeah, so anyway, back to, like you were saying, is to kind of transition from that kind of stuff to writing.
Absolutely, man. Well, that's, man, it's, how does one enter the field like that? Obviously, they're probably fans. They want to cover it. Talk to me about the schedule that you guys have to keep, because like the games you don't make the schedule for the games and everything else that you got to cover. You got to be there.
No, there's no 9 to 5. And you don't, when you're a beat writer, you cover every practice and every game that that a team plays. You go to everything that happens with that team, every media availability, and it's tough. And they'll change practice. Hey, we're not going to go at 4 today. We're going to go at 6 a.m., 6 to 8 before classes start. So you got to switch over, I got to be at 6 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So yeah, there's no 9 to 5, which a lot of people think, oh, that's great. I would hate to, I don't want a desk job, but there's the payoff is, but you might have to be there at 6, or, the game starts at 7 and then it goes into 4 overtimes and the team doesn't want to come out and talk for an hour. And instead of getting home at 10:30, you're home at midnight.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of intricacies about the job that are not fun, but at the same time, it's a fun job. But yeah, you just, you don't have to have been an athlete. You don't have, like I said earlier, you don't have to. Our police beat writer was never a policeman or a criminal. As long as you're a student of the game, and you know what you're doing, and you're a good writer. You got to, being a good writer is a big part of it too.
That's right. Well, I just, it's almost like we're, the average person is almost indoctrinated through, schools this time to this time. Here's where you got to be. And one of the hardest things it took for me to learn, I was doing professional sports after school, so I didn't, it was almost like graduating, the same feeling most people have when they graduate college, I felt when I was done playing baseball. And that was like, I looked in the mirror and I'm like, now what? Now what do I do? Like, I had a major identity crisis with that. But what I figured out is, right now I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you, but I'm a husband and a father. I'm still a husband and a father. And if the phone rang today and it was emergency, I'd be like, gotta go. That's the way we treat our work life at home. It's not like this is work time and that's that. It's a part of us. And we just do what needs to be done for all things, and we have priorities, obviously. Yeah.
And, kind of COVID brought everybody into the world that I live in. And that COVID was not that different for me because I have always worked from home.
Yep.
Or worked from I've written stories at a Pizza Hut parking lot and sent it in at the payphone. Your young staff here doesn't know what the payphone is, but
you guys know what a payphone is? Oh my gosh, they were everywhere, and you had to put change in them. Do you know what change is?
And after that ran out, you had to put more change in.
That's right.
But we started out on a Radio Shack, a Tandy TR60. Trash 60 is what we called them. And all it was a word processor, a flat word processor. And it had couplers and that were connected to it. And you put those in the headset and the microphone of the telephone. And that's how you sent your story in. And you sent it in from wherever you were. And, there, high school press boxes. There's a lot of those rural high schools out there that they'll tell you at 10 o'clock, hey, we got to go. We're locking this place up. So you drive up to the first payphone you can get to and send your story. So yeah, I've always worked remotely.
So you worked in the payphone era. You worked in the beeper, the pager era.
We hated the pager era because then our editors could keep up with us.
Oh yeah,
they could know where you were, and they could So, but it didn't last long either. The cell phone era came up right after the paper.
That's right.
The beeper.
That's right.
But yeah, that's you always, and you make do with whatever you've got to do. I mean, back to that Radio Shack, I covered a game at Tennessee State one night, a basketball game where they let the Aristocrat band in to play in the end zone. The full band is in the end zone playing inside Gentry Center in a basketball game.
Wow.
Well, those couplers, you can't have any outside exterior noise come into those couplers. I couldn't get the story to send.
Oh, wow.
And because the band was playing constantly. Now, later they came up, they got rid of the couplers, and they went directly into the phone and into the back of the computer, which got rid of that extra noise.
That's incredible. That is incredible. Well, man, 38 years in, you're a member of 2 Hall of Fames. You've been Sports Writer of the Year. Literally, like, I've got a laundry list of accolades that you've accomplished since you've been doing this. Like, what's the future hold for you? Like, what goals do you have left? Like, how long are you going to do it?
That's a good question, and it's something I've thought about a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. And, you know, I'm far from burned out, like we discussed earlier, because the job has changed so much.
Yeah. And
my job within the job has changed so much. You know, I'm not covering high schools like I did, 40 years ago. And my job changes throughout the year. I mean, today I'll be working on a story about the largest deer that were killed in deer hunting season, which just wrapped up last weekend with a youth hunt.
Gotcha.
That's completely different from what I was doing Saturday when I covered a basketball game.
That's right.
A college basketball game. So it's different every day. I never do the same thing every day, hardly.
That's cool.
I was on the phone with Mac Brown last night about a story that I'm working on, a big project at the Tennessean that's going to start probably next week. And I'm doing that aside from everything else I'm doing. So I guess what I'm saying is I have no idea, because I'm not close to being burned out.
That's right.
I enjoy it still. I don't feel like I've worked my first day. It's just not like a job yet. And so I don't know. I'll just probably hang in there as long as they'll have me, and as long as it keeps from being something that I'm burned out on, because I'm not tired of it.
Well, man, it's already been a heck of a career. If it was over, if it ended today, right? But it's so cool that you guys still have the enthusiasm and the want to do it. And I mean, look, I interview people all the time, almost for a living, not like this, but like for jobs and investments and everything else. And finding that attitude, finding that heart, finding that in people is rare.
Yeah. I feel so. I have great sympathy not empathy, because empathy is something you have to have experienced. I have sympathy for people who say they hate their job. I can't tell you how badly I feel for people who have to work to put food on the table, and that's the only reason they do what they do. That really hits me to the core, because I can't relate to that. I've never had to do that. And like I said, not because it's an easy job, but because of it's just so enjoyable.
Yeah.
That for people who struggle to sit and watch the clock and just can't wait till Friday.
Yeah.
Friday's the start of the week for me, because Saturday's the biggest day, or Sunday's the biggest day.
That's right.
Some days I don't even know what day it is. Some weeks I don't even know what day it is. I don't, whereas other people are like, oh, it's hump day Wednesday.
Yeah.
I don't know what hump day is, because I don't count down the days like that.
Yeah.
But, it's a job that's still got competitiveness in it, because, when the Nashville banner closed in 1996, we did not celebrate at the Tennessean like a lot of people probably thought we did. I dreaded it, because I didn't have that. I thought, oh, man, I'm not going to have that competition that's going to push me to get something done, to do better than they did, or do something first. Luckily, fortunately for us, I think the internet came on board, and then we had even more competition than we could have ever dreamed of.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we did not celebrate that, losing that competition. So I like the competitiveness that comes with it, and the newness that comes with it every day.
Man, well, like I say, it's such a cool thing that you get to do. It's a service, because you're touching, literally millions of folks on a weekly basis, with literally every word. Yeah,
I think we got the essential status during the COVID, so that kind of validated us.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And again, how long has the Tennessean been around now? Do you know?
Oh wow, 1903, something like that.
Holy cow!
Yeah, something like that. I've got it. I got a brick from the 1100 Broadway location, which was where it started with the banner. And I've got it at home on my in my man cave.
Oh, that's cool.
I double had to check it, but yeah, it's been around a long time.
I bet you have. I didn't even think about that. I bet you have a hell of a man cave with all the people and like access to stuff you had. Oh my goodness.
I do, and we do these Zoom calls, and I had one today, and I started out doing them on my couch in my man cave. And my couch is right here, and my pictures of many of the people that we talked about at the start of this that I interviewed are all on the wall behind me. Or I've done a lot of first-person things, like I've played football. That was a first-person experience. I went up in a hot air balloon, barefoot water skied. I participated in Belmont's first women's basketball NCAA tournament, NCAA practice. Anyway, I've got pictures of me doing all those things. And I used to do the Zoom call of me on the couch with those pictures behind me.
Yeah.
And I had to quit doing it because all the people would always say, hey, who is that? Is that Nick Saban in that picture? So now I go down in the dining room and do it behind a purple wall behind me because I got tired of the people asking me about the people in the man cave.
Well, you're the perfect example. I'm a big believer if you're not happy doing what you're doing, you're not doing what God put you here to do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I started in the 7th grade at Two Rivers Junior High School on the Pirates log. I went in to see what it was like, would it be right to work for the newspaper at the Two Rivers. And they made me the sports editor the first day I was there because I was the only person in sports. And I have written every day since then. That would have been 1975.
Wow.
I've been a writer since
That's longer than I've been here, folks.
Thanks, Nick. I'm glad. Nice parting shot.
Oh, man. Well, it's just credibility at this point, man. So this is probably, I was really excited to ask you this next question. This is kind of how I'd planned on kind of bringing this episode to a close, right? So, again, as a listener, as a follower, as just a person that keeps up with whether it be a sports team or a person, an industry, or anything, again, it's so hard to there's people that you trust, and then everybody else is trying to earn your trust, and it's really hard to, like, sometimes for me, outside of people like you, like, I have to just shut off certain things just because I feel like it's toxic to my mind. What advice would you have because you've been in the industry, you've seen the changes, and you probably have a little bit of insight into the future changes of it and what's coming. What advice would you have to folks to make sure that, like, they're getting the right information, they're getting what to look for, who to look for, stuff like that? What advice would you have for people to make sure that they're getting the best sources? You
got to go to somebody that has access. Make sure that whoever you're reading, that you're relying on, hearing or seeing, is someone who has access to the team, to the players of that team, coaches, general managers, if it's a pro team, athletics directors, or people within the athletics department, people that this source you're relying on are people that they're around regularly, not once a month, but consistently, weekly. Make sure that those people have some accessibility, that they're not just reading what the other person or
that's right.
other source is writing. Make sure that it's somebody that covers, that consistently stays with this team, watches it, and goes to its games, goes to its practices. And you can tell who goes to the practices because they report. If they go to a practice, they're going to report on what they saw at that practice.
That's right.
It's got to be somebody that's connected, not officially, they're not part of Vanderbilt University, but they're connected to that program, that they have enough resources to put one person on Vanderbilt, one person on Tennessee, not somebody that has to bounce around and do a lot of different things, but somebody that, that goes out to Titans practice every day, that's there for all of Mike Vrabel's media availability throughout the week,
right?
And goes into the locker room too. The Titans have I found out this year, the Titans have a lot of media availability. And you got to take advantage of that, and make sure that whoever you're getting your information from is somebody that is connected. And you don't have to know people who are in the know. Just make sure that it's somebody that keeps up It goes to takes advantage of all media availability and stays up to date on the team.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Any closing words for all the folks out there that you want to leave anybody with?
Well, and I thought where you were going with that last question was that for anybody that wants to get involved, somebody coming out of high school or college that wants to get involved in sports writing or this field. And my advice is to come in open-minded, because this field is changing so much, so rapidly, that what you come into could be different a week later than it is the day you come into it. Come in willing to learn and share what you learned with the people that you work for.
Absolutely.
And because they're open, this whole business is trying to find its way, and you can be a big player in that. And so you're not only doing your job, but you're finding ways to do your job differently, because social media is changing constantly.
Absolutely.
And it's not like it used to be. They don't just say, well, we don't put that in the newspaper. That used to, that was the guideline you went by back then. Well, what went in the newspaper is different from what goes online.
Gotcha.
So you got to come in not only willing to do the fundamentals, but to help your industry, help your entity find its way in this industry.
Well, folks, if there's anybody, if you're if you're an aspiring person looking to get into something like this, I can't think of anybody else to follow and do. I mean, literally, I would say probably like 2 careers worth of time in it, you know what I'm saying, and all the accolades to go. So I got to say a big thank you to Mike Organ, the 2-time Hall of Fame inductee, Tennessee Sports Writer of the Year, a sports writer and columnist for 38 years with the Tennessean. Oh, Mike Organ.
It was great to be here, Nick. You and I have worked together before, like we said, on the Baseball Association, but I had no idea you had this kind of operation going. I guess I should have from watching your podcast, but God, what a first-class job you guys do, and it was an honor to be here today.
Thank you, man. And like I say, I tell people all the time, we're just getting started, baby.
That's what I hear.
We're just getting started. Well, folks, thanks again to Mike Organ for hanging out with us today. Once again, that's morgan@tennessean.com, or you can check him out on Twitter at Mike Organ Writer for all the latest and greatest information in Middle Tennessee sports, or we're really nationally at this point, right? So thanks again, Mike, for hanging with me. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of The Hitstreak. I am your man, Nick Hyder. God bless.